so before we get started, maybe I can just poll you a little bit. Who has no experience with .NET? All right, so everybody knows .NET. Who has no experience with .NET for mobile? All right, got a handful. A little bit. What does little bit mean?
I guess it depends on what you mean by .NET for mobile.
Okay, yeah, so what is your mobile .NET experience?
I mean, you've been using like Blazor for web products, so
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, that can be used from a mobile device.
Gotcha.
But nothing distinctly
Yeah.
developed for a mobile device.
Yeah, yeah. So this is one of the fun things about being a product manager at Microsoft, is that I get to talk to a variety of people, right? And the definitions of things and how you categorize things and how you separate what is, mobile versus not, what is native. Like, I could probably poll everybody in here for what does native mean to you and get at least 2 or 3 different definitions. All right, so Xamarin specifically, who has any Xamarin specific experience? Okay, I love it. Not very many people. That's awesome. Cool. Well, you're here to learn about .NET MAUI. There are several other sessions. There's Maddie right there, who's working on her presentation in the back. You're talking about Blazor, is that right? Blazor Hybrid with MAUI. Rachel Kang is going to be talking about accessibility in MAUI. So that's going to be good. So that means I don't have to talk about either of those things. And then Sweeky, you're going to be doing some skydiving with migrations from Xamarin. Yeah. She was telling me her plan yesterday, and it sounded dangerous. That's what I call it. I'm thinking about just live converting an app. I'm like, oh, have fun with that. All right, 4 minutes to go. So who came from the furthest? That's always something you ask at a conference, right? Who thinks you came from the furthest? Where'd you come from? South Africa. Awesome. Do you know Matthew Leibowitz? Yes. We love Matt. Matt's awesome. And Alan Peed is down there too? Yeah? All right. Are you in the same user group? You hang with those guys? Okay, awesome, fantastic. Welcome. All right, nobody can beat South Africa? No? I heard how it is, you're laying in bed scrolling through TikTok. And for me, it's like almost all stand-up comedians. And so this South African comedian comes on, he does great accents. And so he was saying some guy walked up to him after a show and was like, if you can do all those accents, why do you talk like that? Because he's using that very, I guess Dutch or South African accent. And but the funny thing is I understood everything he said because I work with Matthew Leibowitz. It's like, I totally understand you. It's totally fine. Welcome. I guess I scared everybody away from the front row except for Christos.
Thank you. Are you going to have a lot of code on the screen?
There is going to be quite a bit of code on the screen. Yeah, first half is going to be slides, second half is going to be code. So you're going to move up?
Yeah, look at that corner.
I tried to jack up the... Yeah, no, do it. So yeah, if you're in the back and you're hoping to be able to read the code, you might want to move a little closer, but I tried to jack the font up. Couldn't see from the back. This resolution looks a little better than the room we were in yesterday. It was kind of fuzzy and the aspect ratio was off because Maddie was using a Windows machine. Who's got a Mac? All right, the brave few. I have both, but when I updated my machine, because you only get to update like it once every 3 years at Microsoft. When I originally started up, they're like, one of everything. And then like this time around, they were like, one, you choose. I'm like, well, I'm going to go for the M1. I get that new processor. We're on? We're good? It's happening? Welcome, everybody. You don't see who's live, though, do you? You don't know?
I don't know.
You don't know how number of people? Oh, man. All right. Well, that's Carlo in the back. Everybody turn around and say hi, Carlo. All right, thanks for making us all look good. You're all being streamed live, by the way. I hope you signed your waivers and all that sort of thing. All right, let's not waste any more time. I'm good at wasting time, by the way. So I'm David Ortinau. I am a product manager at Microsoft working on .NET. I've been there for a while, and I thought I would give you a quick introduction by way of a personal timeline. So I have been a software developer for a few years, since '96. I don't really feel like it's been that long, but I think some people in the room maybe were born after '96. Yeah. So I started out working for a film production company doing creative type things and a bunch of media streaming, which at the time was like super brand new. Now we all stream media, right? But at the time, nobody even knew how to do it. So we went to radio stations and asked them how they did that radio remote from a gas station, you know, for their special thing. I got a lot into Flash, a lot of interactive stuff, a little bit of games, but mostly just data-driven websites that had awesome animations and drew things all over the place. And as you can see, I dabbled a little bit in Microsoft technology because that's what was being used. So I was learning ASP and SQL and VB script and things like that. And then when .NET came out, I was working for a healthcare company, and so I converted their ASP spaghetti code members benefits portal over to, very exciting stuff, very exciting, over to .NET, first to VB.NET, and then when I realized there were no samples available for VB.NET, I was like, this C# thing apparently is the thing, so I converted it over to C# using migration tools in VS, so I have a history with migration tools in VS too. Then there was the celebrated open source time of Rails and Django and Ruby and Python and Flash Flex. Well, those weren't open source, but PHP. Who's written some PHP? Yeah, only a few. All right, many of you have stayed away. Good for you. Welcome. Come on in. Lots of room. Plenty of room up front, in the back. Choose your poison. Welcome. And then once I was doing a bunch of native, Objective-C and Java mobile development, one of my .NET friends said, hey, there's this Mono thing. You should check this out. You can use .NET to do native mobile development. And I was like, that sounds awesome. So I checked it out and started doing MonoTouch and MonoDroid. And during this period of time, I was freelancing. And then I had my own company for several years. I've worked from home basically for like 20 years, it feels like. So I had my own company doing mobile development as well as continuing to do interactive things. Kiosks, you go to the museum and you can push on things and see some cool interactive things. I did a lot of that sort of thing. But it was all like data-driven. Some of it was educational flow type stuff, some learning management systems. And then in grand old 2017, joined Microsoft as a product manager because what I'm really super passionate about is helping developers be more productive at doing what you do. I love building things, of course, but if I can be in a position to help you achieve more, be more productive, whether it's just your day-to-day coding, learning that new trick. Like one of the coolest things is when I'm live streaming or doing something and somebody's watching me code and they're like, oh, what was that keystroke? How did you just do that? And it saves them a microsecond. It's pretty exciting. And then, of course, now working on .NET MAUI. And as you can probably tell, I've had a few hairstyles. So that's the important part. What was your first online nickname handle, like when you registered? Anybody? Parfait 97. All right. Anybody else have a good one? Slack Attack. That's still your nickname. Mine was Dimer74. Oh, actually, I think I might have done Dimer77 because I didn't want to give away my birth date, so I chose my brother's birth date. It's been a few times. And that was me up there with the Darth Vader t-shirt. All right. This is for anytime. Anytime. That's my email. On social, it's all David Ortinau. It's no longer Dimer77. So hit me up there anytime. That's also GitHub. That's also everything. So please email me if you have questions. You're like, what's the roadmap? What are we really doing? Does Microsoft even care? Are you ever going to implement this? Where's Linux? You know, those kinds of things. Please send me messages. All right, so today, what are we going to be talking about? We've got about 40-ish minutes left. So I'm going to go over the 5 W's, who, what, when, why, where, and whatever the other one was. And so then we'll also touch on making UI great. So I've got some slides for the first half, and then we'll go into a bunch of code demos for the next part. We'll be also covering, some, hopefully you'll leave with a couple of tips for improving your XAML, things you could utilize. And if you don't like XAML, you're XAML-allergic, I'll show you an app that is C# only. And then OS integrations, how you can do things like have the computer talk, things like that. All right, so let's start with the what. So we are building .NET MAUI to be the most productive, native, performant from a single code base. This is really the mission of what we're trying to do and what we are doing, not just trying, but where we're focused on for .NET MAUI for you. We want you to be as productive as possible, and we believe in the value of native apps so that not just that you can benefit from the performance of the native platform, but when Apple releases, what is the upcoming one? Is it 16? Xcode 14, iOS 16? All the new security enhancements, performance improvements, and any new UI that they might release, whether it's for iOS or for macOS, you get those things essentially for free. In .NET MAUI, you can always utilize the underlying platform. MAUI provides you with an abstraction across the top so that it makes things easy and convenient, but you are never more than a couple lines of code away from being able to touch everything that Apple ships you from an API standpoint. So that's a key distinction and something that really sets MAUI and .NET apart. So this is a great app right here, the .NET Podcasts app. You can find it on Microsoft's website, on Microsoft's GitHub, that is. And if you just search for .NET Podcast app, I'm sure that Google or Bing will bring it up for you. And it has great examples of a variety of ways that you can slice and dice your architecture. So definitely check that out. So there are many things that we have done in .NET with .NET 6 that are pretty substantial, and I wanted to highlight them for you. So Xamarin as a SDK, which is the predecessor for .NET MAUI and what is now in .NET 6 for mobile and desktop, has been around for more than a decade. Xamarin Forms, the cross-platform library, has been around and continues to be around for about 8 years now. And so we've learned a lot of things over that time. And one of the things that we've learned is that we've got a lot of differences from .NET that were not meaningful. And we were not able to share a lot of the innovations and advancements in .NET and in Visual Studio because of those differences, right? So we wanted to unify, bring everything that we're doing into .NET and standardize on the types, standardize on the runtime, standardize on the compiler, the project system, all the things that are under the hood that make the ecosystem what it is, so that we can all be moving in the same direction on the same stable foundation and benefiting from all those innovations. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that we've done here on the board. A lot of the .NET and the XAML hot reload is born from things that Xamarin was doing and our team was kind of asking for. And of course, it was never done in isolation. Other teams were noodling on these ideas as well. But we were able to bring a lot of what we had learned to the table and improve things for other .NET workloads like WPF and WinForms and ASP.NET and Blazor. So why? .NET's awesome. .NET's growing. More and more .NET developers every year. Each .NET release, it seems like we're breaking the record in terms of how quickly it's being adopted. And I think that quickness of adoption also really comes down to the ease at which you can upgrade from version to version. The upgrade from Xamarin to .NET 6, that's work. Well, there's no way around that. That's a decent amount of work. But as I will show you, .NET 6 to .NET 7 for mobile and desktop apps, dude, I just changed the 6 to a 7 and it runs. It's awesome. It's fantastic. That's the kind of upgrade you want, right? And that's the kind of upgrade that we're trying to get to, or that we are getting to. I keep saying trying because for the past couple of years we didn't have a product in the market and we shipped in May. Now I need to change my language over. So as you can see, .NET MAUI itself is actually growing as well, 126% cumulative growth. I think that I looked month over month, we were like 85% growth for the last couple of months, so that's fantastic. I checked the graph this morning. We're already well past what we did last month in terms of just people using the product, not just tire kicking and just like, oh, it looks shiny, but actually using it to build things, so I'm excited about that. No sense building something that nobody's going to use. In terms of performance, we know that we had some limitations in the Xamarin space in terms of being able to get the performance that customers really needed, especially on Android. And it's not necessarily impact, like I was talking about before we started. I talked to so many people and customers in different scenarios and in different industries. And you know, for one customer, Android performance is the hill to die on. If you can't start my app up in under a second, I can't use your platform. And then you can talk to another customer, equal footing, you know, in terms of importance and size, et cetera. And the other customer's like, they start the app once in the morning and then they just use it throughout the day. If it takes a minute to load up in the morning, I don't really care, as long as it's stable and it's performant throughout the day. But we do know that it is important enough that we've focused on it in this iteration. And by moving our stuff to .NET and being able to benefit on the performance of .NET and the runtime and the same base class library and all these things that I'm mentioning, we've been able to achieve some wonderful improvements. So 68% faster than Android Xamarin, 44% faster than Xamarin Forms, and our numbers for .NET 7 look in line with this. So we're moving in the right direction. That's very nice. And so here's the other why. From talking to a lot of customers is that, you know, especially in an enterprise company, but even in smaller agencies, you want the flexibility to be able to mix and match your technology and your skill sets to get to the end result. So what I mean by that is you may have a team over here that is really well versed in web technologies. They know HTML, they're comfortable with it, might even love some JavaScript or some TypeScript. Then you've got a team over here that knows all native, maybe they're using Xamarin, and they understand that world very well. Well, you may have opportunities to share code and to share features, but how do you do that? How do you do that seamlessly? And then how do you share skill set? You know, maybe you've got some downtime with your web team. How can you utilize them to do some things for your front-end application, your client applications, whether they're desktop or they're mobile? Well, this is kind of where we've come up with the ability to take Blazor, which is an awesome for web. You can do WebAssembly, you can do web server with it. It's all web standard stuff, right? And it's a very productive environment. How can we then marry that up with .NET MAUI, which is your all native on the client, maximizing code, and get them to work together? And that's where in the middle you can see Blazor plus MAUI, that's Blazor Hybrid. And so what you get in a Blazor Hybrid scenario is you get all the native access to the devices that you get with MAUI. So you've got your accelerometer, your sensors, your file system, your notifications on the device, whether it's in the Windows status bar or it's a mobile push notification, that sort of thing. You've got native UI for the scenarios that you need to be extremely performant. But what about that one widget that you're like, I've already got that on my website and I just need it in my mobile app or my desktop app? You can then blend that Blazor UI in there. And here's the really exciting thing. If you've ever seen hybrid in the past, this is very different than that kind of hybrid where you're bridging across the browser and JavaScript is running in its own process separate from the native app. Because Blazor's .NET and because MAUI's .NET, all the .NET runs in the .NET process. It's all in the native process. So you're not crossing all these boundaries, and really all the browser is doing in this case is presenting pixels. That's it. So right from your Razor template, right from your HTML that's in that Blazor component, you can say, format my hard drive. And it will do it. It'll try to do it, right? You can load up files. There's no barrier because it's just as if you were in the native application because you are in the native application. So it's up for us now to decide when we're designing the architecture of our applications, how much do we want to share? How much does it make sense to share? What gives me the best user experience, et cetera, et cetera. And by having these options, we feel like it covers a lot of the spectrum of what customers need in their day-to-day scenarios, because we hear this need a lot. And because we get asked this a lot. Well, what is Outlook built in? What is Word built in? What are the big Microsoft? What's Teams built in? And it really comes down to they are built in almost everything. Like there's a little .NET in there. There's lots of C. There's lots of React in there. There's some React Native in some situations. It's really a cornucopia of technologies. Is that right for your application? Is that right for your company and your business? Do you have all those skill sets that you actually want to put to work? Maybe, maybe not. These are things to think about. So who is this for? Who's using this? This is a selection of some companies, many companies, using .NET today. Some of them are using us for mobile and for desktop as well, but they're all .NET customers. And we're looking forward to seeing what everybody is going to do with .NET and .NET MAUI. Many customers who have Xamarin apps are in the process of migrating them. We know of some customers who have already started shipping .NET MAUI apps. And so if you've seen any of our presentations about MAUI, you've probably seen Pronto Pay before. Pronto Pay is a great example of a startup company that had Blazor tech and web experience and wanted to get onto mobile devices quickly. So even before we GA'd MAUI, GA stands for general availability, by the way. Somebody asked me the other day, what does GA even mean? And I'm like, I think general availability, general audiences. That's, no, not. So they wanted to get there quickly, so they even took, I think it was like Preview 5, Preview 6, something like that, and they shipped this Blazor app with MAUI. So very cool use of technology. So apps are showing up in market. We recently ran a UI challenge, and I think maybe it's still going on. They are going to be giving out some stickers and some awards and whatnot, but you can get stickers for free before you leave if you didn't get any already. I've got lots left. So you can see there's, this is whatever anybody wanted to make to join the challenge. And so you can see some pretty interesting UI up here. Does this thing have a laser pointer? It does. Look at that. That's not going to help the people online, but sorry. But you can see that, this has got some pretty interesting animation. It's some kind of an asteroids game. This looks like an old DOS desktop application interface. Got some beautiful shadows and UI, really rich UI things happening here. This is a really cool app from, I'm not even going to try to say his name because I'm probably going to quote the wrong guy. But this one and this one are really cool apps. 2024, 2048? 2048, thank you. Thank you, son. That's my son, Declan. He's a computer science and math major, so that's why you know. Yeah, so lots of really great apps that are out there, and most of these are open source. You can go check out their code. This one's a fully functional YouTube player, so pretty awesome. This is a customer that I was speaking with recently, and he had said on one of the live streams in the chat that he was already in the process of upgrading some Xamarin apps to MAUI and having great success with it. And I was like, oh, please tell me more. How has it been going for you? How have you been doing? And this is what he had to say. So his apps are these financial charting apps, payment deadlines. He's got tablet and he's got phone, and he wants to take it to the desktop as well. And he's saying that things are much easier than before, which is what we really, that's what we really love to hear, right? Because we're building these things to make you more productive and take away a lot of the pain. He initially missed being able to place tabs at the bottom on Windows, But once he realized that the flyout was just as good, the sidebar was just as good, now he's happy. So we did make a few changes, moving things from Xamarin to MAUI, but hopefully in line with the best patterns and practices that the Windows team is putting together for Windows 11. So you may not know this, but we are in close contact with them multiple times every week, having syncs. When are new features coming out? How can we support you? When are you going to implement this so that we can align our roadmaps, et cetera? So, you know, even in terms of like 6 year out, they're talking to us about, well, we're going to deprioritize this pattern and we're going to emphasize this pattern because we've determined it's better for users in the end run, right? So we're putting those future plans in motion in MAUI so that you get the best of desktop and mobile as well in .NET MAUI. A couple other examples from some other community things. One I in particular like, because I just mentioned it. Can you build Outlook in MAUI? Yes, you can. You can build Outlook in MAUI. There's really nothing you can't do. This is a Reddit clone from Brandon Minnick. If you are of the XAML-allergic variety, then this would be a great app for you to go check out. It's open source. It's up on his GitHub. And just look for .NET MAUI Reddit clone Brandon Minnick. All right. Where am I at? Where? I need to get to some code. So take a screenshot of this if you're at home. That's easier for you. I will make sure that this is also available later. I wanted to give you some resources. Take your phone out, take a picture of it, whatever you want to do. But this is a really good list of all the places where you can go find out the latest information, as well as just helpful tips and tricks to get you by as you're learning .NET MAUI. Some of it's learning course material. There's plenty of sample code out there. Of course, it's the MAUI repository is where you would file any bugs or issues. There's also discussions there if you want to go ask questions. There's a fairly decent number of people that are up there talking on a regular basis. Our team engages there as well. If you are a contributor and you want to get more into the nitty-gritty of architecture and future features and things like that, I recommend the .NET Discord. So this is a space for those of you who want to come and have those kinds of conversations with our engineers. Live.net for any streaming stuff. And then Javier has put together awesome .NET MAUI, which has tons of links to other projects, plugins, articles, all kinds of really great resources to help you get started and successful with MAUI. And then Maddie and I, hi Maddie, we host a monthly stand-up, first Thursday of every month. You can find it on live.net, or you can just go to YouTube, or you can follow us on Twitter, and you'll hear all about it. But we get together and we share the latest news about MAUI, the latest plugins, the latest libraries that have been updated, and we usually have a guest on to come show us something new. The last one we had, somebody, Shane Newville from the team, came and demoed some .NET 7 things. All right, so that's been up on screen long enough. So a little bit about the roadmap, and then we're going to get into some code. In .NET 7, which is upcoming, we have a build now. It will be coming out very soon as it gets through QA and everything. What are we doing in it? Well, we want to make sure that we bring desktop up to par with what customers are building today. And so we have added context menus, cursors, hover gestures, right-click gestures. Title bar is in the works. It's something that will probably come out a little bit later, but tooltips. So I'm going to demo a few of those things for you today. And then we have some things that we're working on for platform interop. So if you have native libraries you would typically do a .NET binding for, so things that are written in Objective-C, Swift, Java, and Kotlin. The dynamic twins, what did I call them previously? They were like the Wonder Twins. Swift and Objective-C, Java and Kotlin. She got it. She chuckled a little bit. Thank you. And then we're also shipping maps. So the platform interop, we have some ideas to improve that whole how to work with Objective-C, Swift, Java, and Kotlin. And as you can see, we have maps. So this is important for customers who have Xamarin apps that have maps in them, We didn't have maps in .NET 6. Now you have maps. In terms of our release schedule, MAUI ships every .NET. We're part of .NET. We do ship as an optional workload because that's just the mechanism of shipping, but we're .NET. So we ship every year. We ship with the workloads, and every year you get 18 months of support for that release. The reason that we don't do a long-term service release for the MAUI SDK itself is because of our external dependencies on Xcode and on Android. They ship on their own cadences with their own tool sets, and so we need to be able to be reactive to that and respond quickly. So the runtime and the base class libraries, those will get long-term service releases every other release, but MAUI itself is every 18 months. And yep, that's what I just said. For those of you who have Xamarin apps or are thinking about starting Xamarin apps, if you do that, you will be supported until May of 2024. The only thing I will point out is that the Xcode release that predates that will end in April. And so really, basically, the bottom line is if you have a Xamarin app, migrate it as quickly as you can. Because we will support you longer than Apple and Google, but this is still way too long for you to be on that version of Android and that version of iOS. All right. What's coming up in .NET 8? We're just starting our planning for this, and so if there are things that you're hoping to see, needing to see, and you have business cases for, and you want to share your stories with me, I would love to hear that. So we're just now starting our planning for that, but for sure we're going to be working a lot on Xamarin upgrades, making sure that we can get Xamarin customers moved over to .NET, because Xamarin, if you're unaware, is on .NET Framework, and that is, I don't know, way old. And we need to get everybody onto .NET so that it's faster, more secure, et cetera, et cetera. And then we'll continue working on the platform interop, but whatever you want to see otherwise, please let me know. Now, who's ready for some code? What do I have, like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes? 20 minutes? Nice, thanks, Sam. That's Sam Basu from Progress. Did I say your last name right? I don't know if I've ever said it in front of you like that. All right. So I've got a bunch of demos up here. I'm going to start with the Control Gallery app. That's not it. Control Gallery. All right. Let me minimize these other guys. I've got a bunch of apps to show. So, Control Gallery app. So this is a Mac Catalyst app. Mac Catalyst is essentially iOS's UI kit merged together with some AppKit functionality. AppKit is what like a pure desktop app would be written with. And so it gives you the ability to basically leverage a massive amount of your UI kit iOS code onto a desktop app. And as you can see, this doesn't, as you can see, I don't know how to click. It doesn't look like a mobile app. I mean, yes, I have it in the form factor of an iPad, but I can do this. I can do this. And so it also supports light and dark mode, things like this. And dark mode's probably really hard to see in the room, is it? In the back? I'll go back to light. You can see tons of controls available here. Activity indicators. So this is an app up on my GitHub. You can go check it out and kind of just explore around what all is available. It's a pretty functional app. One of the things that I have done here in the Android version I wanted to show you is kind of talk a little bit about buttons and styles. So as you can see here, I've got a button, and that button is styled in a variety of ways based on how I might use it throughout my application. So those of you who work on code bases on a regular basis, do you have style guides, kind of predefined how your buttons should look, how things like that? I'm seeing some nods. No, you make it up as you go. Is that what it is? Yeah. You're like, I am the taste maker. We got one in the back. Cool. So often you want to at least, even if you're deciding it, whether or not you were handed a style guide, you want to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to have my primary buttons this way, and they're going to be disabled. When they're disabled, they're going to look like this. Otherwise, maybe my secondary buttons or my other buttons are going to be outline buttons, etc. So I want to take a quick look at how I did that. And I believe I've got that code here. I do. Let me close a few things. Maybe by way of introduction, I should kind of orient you to what a MAUI single project looks like first. So I'll zoom in a bit here. So single project. From this one project, I can target Android, iOS, Mac, and Windows. Okay? And so if I want to get to any of those platforms, they're all here in the platforms folder. And by way of example, I'm looking at Android right now. I've got a main activity. If you've ever written a Java or Kotlin app for Android, you've got a main activity. And so if we look at the code for this, it is a main activity. It's using the same, meta declaration, whatever these things are called, attributes that you would get in Java. And we are extending a MAUI specific compat activity, but this is it's native code, right? We're calling into the native APIs. So all of that stuff is here and available to you, but hopefully you don't need to spend any time down in that platforms folder, because the goal is to make you productive by doing cross-platform things. Oh, too scared to come in the back door. Gotcha. So we share a ton of things here in the resources folder. And so this is where I wanted to spend a little time talking about how you can optimize your applications. So all of the images for this application are in the images folder. They are a combination of PNGs, SVGs, JPEGs. All the common images are supported. As I saw from my son yesterday, GIFs are supported. So you can bring your favorite cat GIFs into your application, and that will work just fine. These will, by default, be generating all the different DPIs and sizes you need for different screens. So if you've ever done this before, you know that in order to do app icons, splash screens, images at different sizes for Android, for iOS, you need to generate like 2 or 3 different variations or more, depending on what you're targeting. In MAUI, you don't need to worry about that. You just drop your source images here in the images folder, and it will render all of that stuff out for you. If you want to have further control of those things, what you can do is you can come into, and we'll make this easier in the future in Visual Studio, but for now you can actually come into your project file. And this is a good thing for now to get familiar with. You can come into your item group where you have MAUI images, and you can see that right now we have a wildcard. But let's say that I wanted to constrain one of my images to a specific size because maybe the source image was bigger than I wanted, or for any variety of reasons. What you can do is you can say, okay, that image.png, whatever it happened to be, you can provide it with a base size, and if you know what that base size that you want to constrain it to is, you can give it the width and the height, like that. And that will tell MAUI, when you generate this for all those other platforms, this is the constraint that I want you to use. Otherwise, MAUI will intelligently, hopefully, look up all the information it can about that image and then generate sizes for Android, iOS, Mac, and Windows. And if you really want to see all the images, you can go into your OBJ folder, look for Resizetizer, and you'll see how much work MAUI just saved you, because it's a lot of images. All right, back to, yeah, is there a question?
Does it have to be a specific, or can it be a maximum or minimum size on there?
So right now there's not a max and min constraint. If you want to also tell it to not generate something, so if you have that specific of a, you can generate that stuff for yourself out of your design tool, and then when you bring it into MAUI, you can say, don't resize this. That's how I would approach that today. Good question. Oh, I don't know what, Maddie, what's happening with this? You didn't do it? Matt, so if you don't know, Maddie primarily helps with tools, Visual Studio, and things like that for .NET MAUI developers, and a lot of other things. You can also drop fonts in here. And so this is one of the things I absolutely love about MAUI as well, is how easy it is to use fonts. So any font you drop in here you can use by file name, but you can make it even easier for yourself by registering it in your MAUI program, so and with a helpful name. So I've got Font Awesome in here. I've got a couple of Open Sans fonts. I've got a Fabric icon font in here to use the icons. And so you can use them, of course, for normal things that fonts do. You can also use them for font icons, which I think is a really sweet use of this. Because that'll save you from also having to mess around with a bunch of different images and things like that. So while I'm here, this is the MAUI program. Essentially, a MAUI app, the app is where everything starts-ish for you, for your app. And then MAUI program is where you do all of your bootstrapping, wiring up of any inversion of control dependencies. As you can see, I'm registering some fonts in here. I'm also doing some Windows specific. Is anybody familiar with this? Do you know what that's called? No? Conditional compiler directive, yeah. So we call them if-defs. So essentially what this is saying is that this code right here will only run if I'm targeting Windows. Right now, I'm targeting iOS, Android, or Catalyst. So no matter what I pick here, this is multi-targeting. I should probably explain that. This is the first time I've actually demoed multi-targeting to an audience that probably has not done. Who's done multi-targeting? Yeah, 2, 3. Okay, so this is new to a lot of us. Multi-targeting essentially is saying this same code can run on all these different platforms, and you can then use these compiler directives like this. And there's a couple of other techniques to also separate out code. You don't have to intermingle code with compiler directives. You can do things like suffixing your files. Say that 3 times fast. With like Android, Windows, something like that. And it will also multi-target your code. But this is actually using, you can see it's WinRT interop that I'm doing down here. So I'm reaching right into the guts of Windows to center this window on Windows platforms. But this code will not be compiled or run on iOS, Android, or Mac. So you can do similar things for all the other platforms. We have documentation on this, so highly recommend you check that out. So yeah, I can, if you bring in, for example, Progress Telerik's controls, then they have a nice method in here where I think you would do, what is it, Sam? Is it use Progress, use Telerik, use Telerik, like that? Of course, you need to actually get the NuGets and get the license and all that sort of thing. But that's where you would do all of your wiring up for those sorts of things. And that podcast app that I mentioned earlier is a great example to go check that stuff out at. All right, so where I've been heading with this all along is I wanted to talk about the styles. So by default, MAUI now ships with essentially, I wouldn't say naked controls, but they are devoid of color definitions and sizing definitions, because that's really, we have to level everything out so that you can get consistency across the platforms you're targeting. And so one of the things that we did to improve that for you is by providing default values in our style sheets. I call them style sheets because, as you saw, I started out as a web developer. I guess these are resource dictionaries. But y'all know what I mean, right? Everybody's on track with that? Okay, cool. So we have some default styles that now get provided. And there's some sizing information. So you can see the button. This is called an implicit style. Implicit style means that we've just declared a type. All other buttons will now inherit that implicitly. We can turn these into explicit types, or explicit styles, which I'll show you in just a second. So we're setting some default values for colors, font sizes, corner radius, if there is if there's a background color provided, which there is. And then we have a Visual State Manager. Visual State Manager allows us to tweak those values and styles based on the state of the control. So you might have a selected state, you might have an unselected state, you might have a check state, Buttons, of course, they can have a hover state, they can have a press state, or they will have a hover state, right, Rachel? We're going to get that hover state? Rachel's doing the hover. It's already there, we just haven't showed it to anybody. So all of those things can happen through Visual State Manager, and we've set some basic defaults for it here for when that control is disabled. Now, an explicit style would look like this. In my apps, I've got a primary button. So here's the primary button outline. It is also pulling from the, or it is also targeting the specific type of button. But now I'm going to provide some new details. I'm going to give it different visual states. And I'm going to also, in this case, because it is an outline style, I make the background transparent, and then I make sure that I give it a border and a border color, border width and a border color. Now, how do I use that? If I go to my buttons page, I can show you how that's applied. And I think this is just a really good pattern to get used to doing for styling your applications. This way of styling your applications also works really, really well with XAML hot reload, which is the ability for you to be running a debug app, debugging your app and coding at the same time, and just seeing the UI update as you code. You don't have to stop and recompile. We also now have dotnet hot reload, which works on Windows and will be coming to the Mac. That allows you to patch your application while it's debugging from C#. Neither of which I will be demoing for you today, but maybe somebody else will demo it later in the week. I don't know. So I wanted to go to the buttons. See, I get to talking about cool things, and then I forget where I was heading. All right, so here I'm in my buttons page. I do have some styling information at the top that is specific to this page. But other than that, I have my buttons here. So you can see that this button has no additional styling information. And the only thing that I've changed on this button is that it is enabled false. So if we go back to this here, that's the first set of buttons. Okay? Now if I go down to my outlines, I have given it that explicit style of primary button outline by applying the static resource to it. And now it's going to use that. So that is what we're seeing here, the primary outline buttons. And so by doing this, you can very easily style your application using both implicit and explicit styles. And I think that's super useful. Sam, how am I on time? 5.
Does MAUI understand CSS?
MAUI does understand a subset of CSS so that you can use it. Now, if you use Blazor Hybrid, anything that's in the Blazor web view, go to town with your CSS. But there's some selectors and some inheritance type things that it doesn't parse. But most of the rudimentary CSS it will do. And then you can also create your own like vendor specific stuff. So you can like do a -MAUI -funky thing, and you can create those handlers if you really, really want to.
And I can access them through the X key the way that I would access a class.
So you can't, you can't, from CSS, you can't reference the X key. So you couldn't do like like you would with a div with an ID tag. You can't do that. So yeah, there are some limitations there. By far the most powerful way to style is using the XAML. All right, so 5 minutes. I've gotten through one of like 4 demos. So let me close out of the control gallery. Just quit. And let me show you, and I can quit this too. I'm done with Android. Oh, I minimized these guys, didn't I? All right, so I want to show you one of the platform integrations. So this is one of my little toy apps. So this is, I'm learning Korean, and so one of the hard things to learning Korean is counters. Anytime you are referencing the number of something, there is a specific counter term that goes along with it. So I'm 48, by the way, 48 years old. So in order to say my birthday, I have to do this, right? And so that's one number system. Mahonyodosal. And then if I'm talking about money, 48 won, the number system changed. So that's fun. So there's two different number systems in Korean plus counters. So you can see why I might create an app to try to learn this. So now I need to turn it into a game. But what I wanted to show you through this is how I'm doing this platform integration of talking. So that is my counter app. So when I click that button, it's calling the announce clicked. And then I'm using this API right here, which is text to speech. This and like 70 other APIs that are fully cross-platform are baked into dotnetmaui to allow you to do things like compass, geolocation, file system access, connectivity. Am I online? Is it Wi-Fi? Is it data? All those sorts of things, as well as text-to-speech. And so, as you can see, it's just a simple API, text-to-speech. I get the default instance, and then I tell it what to say. I also can then access all of my geo-locale options. I can figure out what my system supports. Hopefully, it supports what I want it to. I go get my co-KR, and that's my language. I can specify a couple of speech options, and that's it. Speech done. Pretty cool, right? I think it's cool. It's helping. I mentioned the XAML. For those who are XAML-allergic, I wanted to give you a quick taste of this app. So this is another app. I don't have it running. Where did it go? Not that one. Let's see. Open my clock. So again, learning Korean. Rachel hates this app. But this is a word clock. It's more art than it is functional. But this is telling us that it's Yoshi Oship Yukbun. So it's 10:55. Right? So this is all laid out and done in C#. So we're using the Community Toolkit's markup extensions. They're basically just all C# extensions to make things easier. I'm building my UI here. This is just my content page that I'm inside of. And I can declare my column and row definitions because I'm using grids. Grids, if you're not familiar with for layout in MAUI, is a really, really powerful. Once you learn it, you're going to love it. It does take a little learning. But then I can then do simple things like all these extension methods. I can just say, okay, new title label row. And well, what's title label? Well, we can go to the title label, and this is essentially, rather than having styles set up, which I could use styles too, I suppose. But I just say, oh, you know what? I can just compose my own control. So if a control doesn't do exactly what you want it to do, you can always just compose them. Just go create a new file, content view or otherwise, and just start throwing other controls into it that you need. So for example, do I have the point of sale app running? I don't have the point of sale. Let's see if I can get that going real quick while I'm talking. Point of sale. I'm going to build it for... I want to build it for Catalyst. So .NET build trun -f, and then I'm doing net 7 because, like I said, all I did was changed the 6 to a 7 and it runs. So this is an app that you can see in the MAUI samples app. And so one of the controls that I wanted to be able to create was this guy here. You can see it's this button that has, oh, it's really hard to see, isn't it? It's a button with an icon, a label, and an outline. And you can kind of get to that with a button, but I want it to be able to have something that pops over it. And so what I did was I composed a border with an image and a label. And then I give it button attributes. And then I've got my cool looking button, right? You can also do things like this control up here, which is a search field. A text field on its own, an entry field, is going to be hard to achieve just that look with. So just strip away the text field stuff, compose a border for the border, and then give it an icon and the text field. And you're good to go. Don't waste your time banging your head against an entry when you can just do this and it performs just fine. If you want to, you can then go into the native controls and you can do all the work there as well. That's a tooltip. Where did I put the context? There's my context menu. I right-clicked on it and got my context menus. And those are super easy to implement. I'll show you the code for that real quick because I'm sure you're super excited. There's so many more things I could have showed you. If only I had the time. And I know I'm over time. You've already cut me off.
Doesn't have glyph icon support.
Say that?
The styling doesn't have glyph icon support.
So it doesn't directly have the glyph icon support, but what I typically do to get the glyphs is I run my font through a C# generator. It'll create a static class for me, and then I can just reference it using the static class. So that's a really convenient way to do it. What was I showing you? Tooltips are really easy. You just annotate any control that you want the tooltip on it with the tooltip code. And then for the context, for the flyout menu, it's just that. Any control you want to put a context menu on, you annotate it like this. You can give it commands if you're an MVVM purist. If it makes more sense, you can give it an event of some kind. What is it, Rachel? Is there a click event, tap event? You can do something else. She's like, she wasn't. This is what was happening to me yesterday. I was in the back looking at my computer, not paying attention. Yes? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. That is not using cognitive services. I just provide it with a string, and it reads it. So I used a library that is Humanizer. Humanizer would do one of the number systems. I had to manually do the other number system myself. Yeah. So Humanizer is a great library if you need something like that that turns singulars into plurals and things like that. Well, I'm over time. Thank you very much for joining. Hope you got something out of it. I had fun. That's my first time back with the real people in a real room in like 2.5 years.